Hey friends, happy Friday. It's time to sew. And I don't know if I remember how. It's been a long week. Let me bring you up to speed on a few things that have happened in my life, and then we'll get right to the project tonight. I also realized I didn't turn on that light. So I'm going to turn that light on so that my face doesn't look like it's hiding in the shadows of a cave when I get in front of the sewing machine. Sorry about that. So, things that have happened in my life this week. Well, work has kicked up. I have started a new project at work that I am really excited about, but it means for the next 18 months, work is going to be very busy, and I am here for it. So, really excited about that. It also means that this week was the first week of that new project starting up, which means I haven't had a whole lot of downtime at home. The downtime that I have had, I've kind of needed to spend recharging my brain because the days have been very busy this week. So this is probably the first time that I really I've got a chance to sit in my sewing room and just digest and think about the things I need to work on, which also means this weekend is going to be a very big sewing weekend for me because there's a lot of things that I want to do that I haven't been able to do during the week in the evenings this week. I don't know if maybe some of you can relate. So I know I can. That is the first thing that has happened in my world today or this week. The other thing that has happened is my quilt guild, Cabin Branch Quilters out of Lake Ridge, Virginia, is hosting a quilt show Saturday, October 5th and Sunday, October 6th at Benton Middle School in Manassas, Virginia. And I have 3 quilts that have been accepted to be displayed at the quilt show. One of them is quilt show ready, meaning there's binding on it, there's label on it, there's a sleeve on it, but the other 2 are not. And so tonight, because the quilts will have to be turned in about a week, I need to get the binding going on the other 2 quilts. So tonight I'm actually going to be binding my Trellis Garden quilt, which is the quilt top that Donna from Handmade by Ying is working on as a sew along that she's broken down over 4 or 5 weeks over on her channel. I believe she kicked that off last week, so you can always catch up. The replay is always there. You can go back and watch it. She's taken the pattern and breaking out each section of the pattern and walking you through each one of those sections. So tonight I'm going to show you what that quilt will look like when it is fully finished, because that is what I'm going to be binding. For those of you that are curious, because I'm sure some of you are going to ask, who quilted it? And we're going to get to that in a moment too. It is Beth from Goody Goods. She did the long arming on that for me. Let's see what else has been going on this week. I think that's really it. Like work, and more work. Oh yeah, and more work. I don't have much else in the way of announcements. Yes, I do have 2 more things. So I did spend a little bit of time on the computer this evening, doing computer work in the front room while the husband's watching TV and I'm just kind of listening to what he's watching is a welcome change from sitting in my sewing room away from everybody and sewing on a project. And so this week I have kind of refreshed my merch line. So if you guys have been around for a while, you know that a couple of years ago, one of my 2 sisters had offered to make some designs to put on t-shirts and other merchandise and other fun things. And that just didn't pan out for her. Her life was hectic, mine was hectic, and syncing everything up so that she could use that as a creative outlet it didn't work. So I've breathed, I don't know. I've put a little bit more life into that. So I just went small. I just have 4, I think, maybe 5 designs. One of them is my logo, and a couple of them are recycled designs, images that I really liked from previous releases. I made them available in a dark font and a white font, so you can get them on a light version of clothing or a dark version of clothing. And all of those items are available on my website. You go to sewbecca.com, right there on the main page, you'll see all of them right there. You can scroll through them. I will let you know that the t-shirts and hoodies, that's all I'm doing, just a t-shirt and a hoodie. Each one of those has 5 different colors that you can pick from. So if you see a design that you like, click on it, open it up, and you can choose one of the 5 colors for the t-shirt or the hoodie. And I think some of them might be tagged in this video if you're watching live or watching on the replay. I think that is now it. Oh, I guess we could give a notice about Ian. So Ian will be landing in Virginia at the end of this month, and he has proactively, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I'm going to do it anyway. He has proactively signed up to be a member of the Cabin Branch Quilters Guild, which is the guild that I'm a member of, so that he can have a couple of his quilts in the show as well. I think he has 3 that will be on display at the Cabin Branch Quilters Guild. So if you are local to the Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland region, you're looking for a quilt show to go to, and you'd like to see some of the quilts that we have hanging, I will let you know that he and I both are planning to attend the Cabin Branch Quilters Guild show at Benton Middle School on Sunday, October 6th. Times TBD, we'll let you know as they get a little bit closer. On Saturday, October 5th, we will be at the Virginia State Fair because I've got 2 quilts that will be on display at the Virginia State Fair. So if you're looking for where we're at, that's where we'll be. And the week before it, on Saturday, September 28th, we will be at the Quilt Expo in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He's literally going to land in Virginia, and then I'm going to snatch him up and take him to all the quilt shows. Sounds like fun, right? He had just chopped into the chat and said, I heard my name. We've got several people in the chat tonight. Mary is saying, I love your top. This is actually an apron that I got off Amazon, and there's a video coming out on how I made it work the way I wanted it to. So I got tired of wearing just t-shirts and having all the strings and threads and everything kind of stick to me. Missouri Star sent me an apron in their Sweet 16 box. If you haven't seen my unboxing for that, you can go check that out. That video released this week. And I started wearing that apron, and I realized I really like wearing an apron or a smock of some sort in my sewing room. And so I am here for all the aprons as long as they cover me decently. So, all right, let's see. What do we have in the chat? We've got, I'm just going to read out a couple of green names that I see. Katie, the Greenland Quilter, is here. Rain's Whisper Lynn is here. Hello. Hi, Auntie Carol M. Good evening to my moderator friends, Mary, my mom, my sister, Donna, Ian. Hello, hello, hello. Pam Conley says, good day today, Grandparents' Day at our youngest granddaughter. Awesome. Sophie Bertel is here and says, hi, everyone. Just popping in for a bit tonight as I need to be up early. Understood. I have to be up early too, so we're not going to keep this super long tonight. Shelly Moyer is here, says, hello, Becca. Just came over from Donna's and I love your apron. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so you guys know the trend. We're going to skip to, well, I guess before we do that, let me come back up here and show you what this quilt's going to look like. I'm going to go to the 3 camera view and I'll be sitting here sewing. If you have a question or a comment, just tag me in the chat or tag one of the moderators whose name is in blue and they can text me. I've got my phone right here. I'll see the message and that'll be a great way that I can answer your question in case the chat goes a little too fast for me. Also, while I'm here, Mary, do we have any giveaways that we could do tonight? Could you let me know in the chat? Maybe we can do a couple of giveaways tonight. All right. So here is the quilt. This is Trellis Garden. I'm going to try to do it justice by holding it up for you. This was made entirely out of Tula Pink fabric. I used the Neon Everglow animals. And for the background and the solids, that's even Tula Pink solids. So everything, like it was Tula Pink designer, something like that. Definitely, I think it was Tula Pink. Anyway, it's not like her normal colors. They're just her blenders, her basic whites and whatever. So that's kind of what the quilt looks like. I wish you could get a better view of it, but it's so big and I can't back up much more. The back of it is that pretty geode print from Tula Pink. And it's, now I don't know what to say about it. It's the back. Beth from Goody Goods did the quilting on this, and she chose this really pretty windswept design, which I really kind of liked. And the thing that I love about this quilt is actually the color placement. It, I, I wished I could hold the whole thing up so you could see it. Oh, I just love it. I just love it. So tonight I need to bind this. And what am I going to bind it with, you ask? We are going to bind it with this gray. Now this gray is actually the same color as the snowballs that I have, which you can kind of see there. And this is the sleeve that I'm going to use for the back. So when I started thinking about how I'm going to bind the quilt, what I'm going to bind it with, I wasn't quite sure. I'll tell you honestly, my first thought was to bind it in this dark color because I thought that would be really nice. I really kind of like that really dark gray color. But then Beth sent it to me and she said, you know, you have a good bit of extra from the back. You could bind it in the backing. You could bind it with that leftover geode. And I thought, okay, maybe. And then I got the quilt and I asked her, whenever she quilts something for me, she offers for an extra fee the squaring and serging all of the sides for it. So you could start using it right away. I know Ian swears by serging his quilt before binding. And this is my first time ever having a quilt that has been serged on all four sides and applying my binding. So we're going to see how I like this. But anyway, when she did that, the gray that she used for the thread that went all the way around is actually pretty doggone close to the gray that's right here. And in the pictures that I saw of the quilt on Instagram, and especially once I saw it in person, I was like, no, that's the color that I want for the binding. I can see it. That works for me. And I just happen to have fabric that was that color. So I've got my binding strips prepared. I have my I have my sleeve prepared, and I even have my label printed and prepared and ready to put onto the back. Now the label I will hand stitch on after I get all the binding done, but the sleeve had to be ready for me because I put my sleeve on in between the quilt and the binding, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So when I'm ready to make a sleeve, I measure the width of my quilt and then I take off like 2 inches or so. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And then I cut off a 9-inch piece of fabric. And if I've got to cut off 2 that are 9 inches by width of fabric so that I can piece it together and make it wide enough, then I absolutely will. I hem on both sides of that. Then I sew it right sides together and flip it inside out. And when I put this on the quilt, I'm going to lay it down so that the seam is against the back of my quilt. But I want my sleeve to be centered on the back. And so what I'm going to do is find the center. This is the first step I have to do for my binding. I'm going to find the center of my sleeve, and I'm just going to finger press that for just a moment. And then I'm going to find the top of my quilt. Since this is directional, I got to make sure I'm putting this on the top. And I'm going to find the center along that top edge of my quilt. And for this, I don't think I'm going to be able to finger press that as much. Here's my gut check. I can lay this down on the table, and if, when they are folded in half, I'm coming about 1 inch or 2 away from the side, I know I'm going to be golden. So this sleeve is not as wide as the quilt. That's what I want. Okay, I need to mark the center of this. So what I'm going to do is grab a pin. Mary has 4 mystery bubble mailers that we're going to do this evening, so she will take care of that in the chat, but I am going to ask you guys to just be patient with her because she is working with one hand. The girl broke all 4 of her fingers on one hand. So she might be a little slow to type, and she might be a little slow to get things going, but we're going to give her a little bit of time, and 4 lucky members are going to win a mystery bubble mailer. All right. So here we go. I'm going to take the center of my sleeve. I'm going to line it up so that that center part is on the center part of the back of my quilt. I'm going to make sure that that seam that I made is going against the back side of my quilt. And then I'm just going to clip this along the edge of the quilt. Kathleen says, I'm a quilting newbie. What is a sleeve? So a sleeve is basically just a casing. A lot of quilt shows, and by a lot, I mean, I've only entered ever like 2 or 3, but I believe the standard is 4 inches. A lot of quilt shows want you to have a 4-inch casing. It's basically the casing that allows you to put a rod or something through it and allow it to hang on display. Now, I'm not going to have this fully finished tonight. All I'm doing is just tacking it between my quilt and the binding. And then once it's all done, I'll have to go in and hand stitch the bottom fold against the back of my quilt so that this casing stays secure against my quilt while it's hanging up instead of pulling up and over. Get the picture, right? Looks like Ian sent me a text message, so let me pull up my text so I can actually see what's coming through, because I did not do that. Oh, he sent me the question that I just answered. Awesome. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. There we go. Get those all open so that they are down here and I can see them. Perfect. All right. So now I'm going to go to my normal setup so that you can see all the angles of all the things that I'm doing. Don't forget there is a raffle going on in the chat for a mystery padded envelope of goodies, and you can get your chance to win that by typing !raffle, all one word on one line with nothing else, if you are watching the live stream. Trying to keep this sleeve nice and straight along that edge of the quilt. So you'll notice when I did this, I started at the middle and worked my way out to one side, and now I'm working my way out to the other side. And then I'm just going to bring this over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to edge stitch right along that edge. And when I say edge stitch, what that basically means is I'm going to sew at like 1/8 of an inch instead of my normal seam allowance. And that's just going to help tack this on so it's there and out of the way, and I don't have to hold the clips while I'm also trying to do all of the binding. You could use a basting stitch for this if you don't want to do a really tight stitch. The most important thing is that you're just tacking it down. So I'm just going to stitch on that serged edge. As long as my needle is going inside that serged thread area, I'll be happy. All right. Now, for the purposes of this quilt, I know that some of you out there are going to say, whenever I make a show quilt, I always hand stitch my binding to the back. Well, guess what? I'm not going to do that. I am going to stitch my binding to the back, and then I'm going to pull it around to the front, and I am going to stitch it by machine down to my quilt using a coordinating thread and just staying really close to the folded edge. Now, one more thing that I am going to do, just because this is going to drive me insane, I don't want my flap to come up over while I'm working on this. So I'm just going to grab a couple of pins and pin that flap down in a couple of places so that it stays laying against the back of the quilt. I've had a couple of times where I didn't do that, and the end result was that I had to unpick some stitches because the flap flipped up. Say that 10 times fast. The flap flipped up. There we go. So that'll do what I need it to do. We're going to stitch from the back first, and it doesn't really matter for me the way I do my binding. I don't really care too much about where I start because I can't tell when it's all done. Maybe somebody else could, but I usually can't tell where I started my binding once it's all done. And by the way, if you are here for a binding tutorial, maybe you're like, oh, this is great, but you don't want to spend 2 hours watching me do this painstakingly every step of the way. I have an awesome binding tutorial for you that you can go check out. It's out there. It's on my channel. I believe it's under the popular video section. Go check it out. All right, so my binding, I'm going to pull off a piece. I'm going to leave a nice long tail. I'm going to start in the middle of a side, and I'm going to start stitching this down. I'm coming over about 3/8 of an inch. I'm just going to stitch a little bit, back stitch on that, and then go back down. I'm only going to go a few inches because I like to make sure that my binding is going to wrap around nicely. So I'm going to stop here, lift my needle up, and I'm going to pull this out. Now I can see on the front of the quilt that stitching that I did, and I want to just, let me snip that thread. I want to just see if the distance that I had between the edge of the quilt and where I was stitching is going to be enough. So I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to flip it up, finger crease that down in the back, and then I'm going to fold it around to the front. And do you see how, maybe you can't, but that's just a little too short. I can still see the stitching. So I know that I had too big of a seam allowance. So I'm just going to rip out this bit of stitching. Guess I didn't really need to back stitch. Okay. And this time I can see where my stitching was before because I have the stitching holes on my binding. So I want to stay between the edge of the fabric and where I was stitching before. So this time I'm going to try with 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm just going to stitch a few inches. Pull my needle up, pull this off. Man, I made a mess with all those threads. My mom would not be proud. Just snip off these loose threads really quick. There we go. And then I'm going to flip this over just like I did before. What is the width of the binding that I'm using? Ruth Roberts wants to know. I am using 2.5. But there are a number of different widths that you can use. And I do have a binding calculator on my website. So that's what I'm looking for. That looks good. All right, so I'm just gonna keep measuring this from the edge of my 1/4 inch presser foot all the way down. And while we're doing that, we're gonna get the stuff going here. Move this out of the way. I have learned that the biggest tip that I could give anybody for binding a quilt is to get the whole quilt up even with the bed of your machine. Don't even let it hang off of the edge a little bit, because if you do, that's going to put just a teeny bit of resistance, and any amount of resistance when you're doing this is going to make your shoulders and your back hurt. So the more you can get it lifted up and have even with the bed of your machine, whether you're quilting or binding, the better off you're going to be. I just broke my thread. Did you guys see that? Maybe not. But the thread went flying up. Whew! That was fun. Let's rethread my needle. Get in there. Come on. Can't get it in. There we go. Okay. Jenny Harris says, what is the piece of tan fabric? This is the sleeve. This is at the top of the quilt on the back side. And this is what's going to allow the quilt to hang on a display at the quilt show. That's weird. What the heck? Okay, try that again. Okay, I must have run out of bobbin. Did I run out of bobbin? No, I didn't. Why did the thread break, and why are we having a hard time now? No live stream would be complete without having to diagnose your machine, right? All right, let's just put another drop of oil in the bobbin. We'll put our bobbin back in, which looks like it is getting kind of low. So I'm just going to go ahead and change that out. I'll use the rest of that later. Okay. Now I'm going to thread my needle again. Ah, that one was quick. All right. It's Friday the 13th, Gremlins. Oh, it is Friday the 13th, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Hadn't even realized that. May I ask a question, please? What am I looking at price-wise? Hold on. I missed it. Where did it go? May I ask a question, please? What am I looking at price-wise for a long armor to quilt a queen-size quilt? $300-ish? I've never done one before, or I've never done one or had one quilted before. Honestly, I think it depends on the long armor. I would tell you to reach out to a long armor and let them quote a price to you. I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. Okay, sorry. And the reason for that is because everybody's prices can differ a little bit, but most long armors are about 2 to 3 cents-ish, I think, per square inch of your quilt. And the best way you can get that number is to take the length of your quilt, multiply it by the width of your quilt, and then multiply it by like 2 cents. But it depends, right? Like, because if you're asking for custom quilting, that's going to be more expensive than just edge-to-edge computerized quilting. Joanne is my winner. Thank you so much, Mary, for letting me know. Let's make sure that Joanne knows that she's won and she responds in the chat so she can claim her prize. And then Joanne, you'll want to send your physical mailing address to mary@sewbecca.com and she will get out your prize package for you. Okay, so I am coming up on the corner here and I want to miter this. I also have my sleeve right here. I'm going to back stitch over this just a little bit to kind of give it a little more security. And my next step is to come down about 1/4 inch away from the edge right here. So I'm just going to come all the way down. I'm going to stop stitching about 1/4 inch away. I'll back tick just a little bit and I'll pull this out from under my needle. Awesome. Thank you, Mary. She said she responded. That's great. All right, now I'm going to take my binding, and I like to do this origami thing where I fold it at a 45-degree angle, making sure that the cut edge here is flush with this edge of the quilt. It should be nice and even. I fold it away, crease that down, and then I fold it back on top of itself. And this time what I'm looking for is making sure that the fold is nice and even with this edge of the quilt. The raw edge is nice and even with this edge of the quilt. And my two folded pieces that are kind of laying on top of each other right here are lined up with each other. If that's the case, which it is, I will very delicately hold this. You could clip it or pin it if that worked for you. I'll bring it back to my sewing machine and then I'm going to start stitching off of the quilt right onto it at that same seam allowance that I was doing before. There you go. By the way, I used my binding calculator to figure out how much yardage I needed for the binding of this quilt and how many strips I needed to cut if I was going to do 2.5-inch binding. Remember, the calculator will give you yardage and cutting instructions for the 2.5-inch binding, flange binding, and 2 1/4. If there's another binding size that you would like to see included, let me know. I'll be happy to update the calculator to accommodate those additional sizes. And if you don't know what I'm talking about by binding calculator, I have a set of quilting calculators on my website, free to use, that are designed to display nicely on your computer or on your mobile device. So if you're out and about, you need a quilting calculator. These are easy to read, easy to use, easy to load. You can just bookmark them and save them on your home screen. All right, same thing here. We're going to fold away, lining up that edge, and then back over top of it, making sure that all of my reference points that I pointed out earlier are nice and lined up. And I'll come back over and keep stitching. Next week on Saturday, I got to get it scheduled. It's not been scheduled yet, but next week on Saturday, the 21st of September, I'm going to have Stephanie Harris, who is Memoirs of a Long Arm Quilter, Donna, and Sean from The Guy Who Sews here with me on my channel for a special live stream. I think it's going to be at like 6 o'clock Eastern time, but I'll have to double check what we had committed to. And we're all going to work on a project featuring a jelly roll. And then you see us get started on it, work on it, and then check out how that project finishes on our individual channels. Joyce says, Becca, your calculator will help me from getting a headache. You're welcome. Oh, why are we not stitching anymore? I know you have bobbin. What happened? The bobbin thread must have broken. Ugh, the gremlins are here, guys. The gremlins are here. 100% the gremlins are out to play today. Otter in Time says, hi, I'm finally catching you live for a bit. I always watch over the weekend. Hello. Welcome to the live stream. All right, let's see if we can get this back where I was. So the bobbin thread broke, and so what I'm going to do is put my needle back over the last few stitches that I took, and then I'm going to come in here with my needle, and I'm going to hold my top thread. I'm going to hand crank the needle down to bring up that bobbin thread so that I have a nice clean stitch. I'll pull that loop out, and now I'm going to start stitching directly over top of the stitches where I left off with, and hope that all works. I probably should have back stitched there, but I think it'll be okay. Don't forget, guys, if you have a channel here on YouTube that you would like people to check out, you can do exclamation selfie in the live chat. Probably want to wait until after this giveaway is done so that everybody can see it. But that command is available for you to use. You just have to wait 15 minutes between the uses. So you can't spam the chat with your channel link nonstop. What is going on right here? Are we not stitching? We're not stitching again? Oh, come on, Ruby. For the love of all that is red and shiny. I don't know why you want to play games. Are you mad because I have ignored you all week? Well, listen, somebody's got to make money to buy fabric, okay? Something's off in here. It don't feel right. Hold on. Okay. I must have just been putting it in at an angle. We're going to load the bobbin into the case again. Tension feels good. Bobbin going in. Clicked in nicely. Good, good, good. Scrap fabric to test my stitching. Ooh, that don't sound good. That don't sound good at all. Ooh. That don't look good either. Okay, so we thought we were going to bind a quilt. But instead, we are apparently all right. Instead of putting binding on a quilt, we're apparently going to have a fight. All right, get back in there. All right, listen, Ruby. Stop taking your love to town. All right. I'm going to need some more leaders and enders soon. That sounds good. That looks good. Can we do more of that, please? That would be great. I would really like you to do more of that. Thanks. If I have to stop and turn this car around, you will not be happy. That's it. Good girl. Good girl. See, I knew you had it in you. Sometimes these old ladies just want to get cranky. I don't want to work. You let me have a whole week off. Why do you got to put me back to work? Because I said so. Dang it. We got a quilt show to enter. Get working. Ian texted me and said, and here I thought I was the only one that talked to my machine. No, I yell at it. I won't say 4-letter words, but I will say, dog nabbit, stupid son of a gun, you stupid gun. You might see steam coming out of my ears. Isn't it nice to know that you're not the only one that struggles with issues with your machine, right? Like, it's kind of relieving. It's kind of refreshing to see somebody else struggle with it, especially when you're used to seeing content from people on social media where everything's polished and it's all just finished and it all just went beautifully. Guess what? It doesn't always go beautifully. It doesn't always go beautifully. Sometimes we struggle, and sometimes we have to... We're going to have words. Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but we've got all of our friends here with us, and you're not playing nicely, okay? I don't know what else to do. I'm giving you thread. I've given you oil. Would you like me to rub your back? I don't know. But if you break the thread one more time, I'm going to do nothing because I need to bind this quilt. So, haha, joke's on me. You've got me. Oh, goodness gracious. Ruby has binding allergies, Free Spirit says. Oh, actually, thank you. I love to sew says, do you need a new needle? You know what? I don't think I do, but that is the rule, isn't it? And I can't remember the last time I put a needle in there. I've broken a needle. Well, not broken a needle, but I have broken thread, 3 times now? So let's just go ahead and change the needle out. Is that what you want? You want a new needle? Fine. I got you. I think it was only like a week ago that I did a needle or whatever. Needles can get burrs. That's fine. That's fine. This is an easy fix, Ruby Lynn. By the way, I just gave you a middle name. How do you feel about that? Ruby Lynn? Is that good? No? Because Ruby Marie, I don't like. Okay, now listen. We're going to put this needle in. And then we're going to show all of our friends how much better you're going to cooperate with that new needle all up in there, huh? Yeah? Yeah? You like that, don't you? Yeah. That sounded horrible, didn't it? Oh well, it wasn't what I meant. Get your minds out of the gutter. All right. Question, why is it necessary to set the seam before pressing it open? It relaxes the fibers and just makes it easier to press. At least that's what I think. But somebody in the chat might have a different answer. I find the fabric can cooperate a little bit more if you can get the waviness from entering. Oh, good girl. You took 3 stitches without breaking thread. I'm so proud of you. Could you go this entire side? Yeah, yeah. She said maybe. We'll see. Why is it sometimes, I don't know if anybody else has this issue. I know I certainly do. Whenever I'm working on a project, I can struggle with thread breaking and I can struggle with cutting fabric, and I don't even realize that the issue is that I need a new needle or I need a new rotary blade. I just keep working with it until somebody's like, oh, when was the last time you changed your needle? And then you're like, oh, genius. Genius. Okay, how many people in the chat think the new needle just fixed our problem? Rain's Whisperlin says, I feel like I just got called out for just a minute. Marie France Perrier says, tell Ruby to do it for my birthday. LOL. Happy birthday. Casey said, don't forget, Ruby is old enough to be your mom. Hey, look, Becky from Power Tools with Thread is here. Hello, Miss Thompson. Guys, don't forget to check out Cher's channel. She can drop her link by doing exclamation selfie in the chat as well. She's got an awesome channel. She's been doing live streams most days of the week at 7:30. Is it 7:30 a.m.? I think it's 7:30 a.m. Get the notification while I'm getting ready for work. She is another Fat Quarter Shop affiliate as well, so she does a lot of Fat Quarter Shop sew-alongs over on her channel that you can check out. Kathleen Carnes is the winner for this go-round. Congratulations, Kathleen. Husband's doing the rounds. Are we going to get through this whole side without breaking thread? I think we might. Oh, Beth is in the chat as well, you guys. Beth from Goody Goods. She has a channel on YouTube. She's got a decent Instagram following as well. But more importantly than any of that, she's my long armer. Until such a day where I have Pro Stitcher and can set my machine to do computerized edge-to-edge quilting while I am multitasking and working on something else in my sewing room, she will be the person that finishes the quilts that I just don't have time or desire to do. And quite frankly, even after Pro Stitcher, I'm sure I'll still be sending business her way. If you want to check out her services, goodygoods.com is her website. All right. My binding calculator did a pretty doggone good thing because I think I'm not going to have much left over. Ooh, I can take these pins out now because they're poking me and I don't want to be poked. No poking, not fun. Exclamation selfie if you have a channel now. There you go. Do it now before Mary starts another giveaway because we've done 2 and we're going to do 2 more and she's going to take a potty break. Or as Ian would call it, a bio break. Exclamation selfie! Get your channels out there. I feel like what is it, the candy striper? Candy cigarettes. All right, so I am coming around the last edge of my quilt, and what is going to need to happen is I'm going to have to join up these edges, and there's a couple of ways that you can do this. There's the cheater method and then the way that I normally do it. Because this is one that I am going to be hanging in a quilt show, I'll probably do the normal way. So once I've got a bit of a gap in between here, and you can't really see it in the overhead, but you can see in the machine, there's about a hand's width gap here. I'm just going to stop stitching. I'm going to pull this out. I'm not even going to worry about back stitching, because if a couple of those stitches come loose, it's going to be okay. Then I'm going to bring this over to the overhead so that you can see what I'm doing a little bit clearer. I like to snip off a piece of my binding, and you'll notice that I left the selvage on when I started doing this. That's because I always cut at this stage, so I don't worry about trimming off the selvage at the beginning of my binding. This piece of fabric is now exactly as wide as this is, and the trick is to get my binding fabric to overlap exactly as wide as the fabric is. So I'm going to lay this down on here. My back itches, I'm going to scratch it. And then I'm going to get a better pair of scissors because the snips won't give me as clean of a cut. I'm going to pick a spot to put this down, and I'm going to trim off my binding that I started with, making sure that the cut edge is lined up with the edge of that little piece of fabric. And I know you can't really see because they're the same. I also want some of these stitches to come out, so I'm going to get my seam ripper. I want to make sure that I've got a good bit of tail on either end to work with, so that I can manipulate this under the needle. That should be good. I'm looking for probably about 4 inches or so past. All right, my edges are lined up. Now I'm going to take the other one and lay it over top of it. And with my scissors, I'm going to cut just a thread before the edge of my demo piece. This is what was left over of my binding from my binding calculator. I probably could have cut 1 strip less, but I have the formula rounding up a little bit, that's not that bad for waste. I can put it in my scrap binding bin to use later. So now what I'm going to do is join these two pieces together just like I do when I'm joining my strips together. And this is the piece that can trip a lot of people up. And so what I try to remember to do is I fold this towards me. This is the starting end. And then I just lay this piece on top of it like this. And I'm going to start stitching up here and go this way. So my stitching should run parallel to the edge of the quilt. I want to make sure that these raw edges are nice and lined up. And so for that, I will use a couple of pins to kind of hold that in place. You could use some fabric glue, or if you're feeling super brave, you could live on a wing and a prayer and try it that way too. I personally have done all of those methods. You do what works for you, because remember, there are no rules in the sewing room. Nobody else's rules anyway. The only rule is yours. If you're having a problem where this is too taut and you can't get it where it needs to be, I find folding this and putting a clip on it like that makes it a little bit easier to get the fabric to line up. So I'm putting one pin on one side, get this to open all the way, and then I'm going to put another pin on the other side. And if you want to mark this, you can. I'm going to wing it. I feel like I do an okay job eyeballing the start and end when I sew on that diagonal. So I'm going to put this underneath the machine, fold the quilt in half so that I can manipulate this fabric under here a little bit better. I'm looking for, take this out, hold it with my hand. I'm looking for the top corner of the bottom piece, and I'm looking for the top or the bottom corner of the top piece, and I'm just going to stitch at a 45-degree angle all the way down. Before I trim any of this off, I want to make sure that I did a decent job sewing this, and the way I can test it is to bring it back over to this overhead camera. I'm going to take that clip out and I'm going to lay the quilt top flat. If that binding goes nice and taut against my quilt, there's no bubbles, there's no twists, there's no seams, then I know I'm good to go. I can trim this off or just press it open, whatever works for you. I'm just going to press it open. And then with a couple of clips, I'm going to make sure that I'm holding this in place. And I'm going to finish stitching this down. By the way, that seam where I joined this, I pressed that open so that it distributes the bulk for me. It's evenly distributed on the left and the right side of the seam, so I don't have a big bump in my binding. And now I am stitching on the line that I had before, effectively back stitching it in, but I'll just take a couple stitches. I'll pull the needle out. Pull this out from under the needle, and now my binding is attached to the back side of the quilt all the way around. And it has also locked in, if you can see, the label, or I'm sorry, the sleeve. I will have to go in and hand stitch this all the way across to really secure that down. My next step is to flip this quilt over and then pull the binding, wrap it around to the front, and stitch it down. Now there's a few ways that you can do this. Again, I've got a binding video where I go through all of these steps. You can press it around, you can glue baste it down, but you know what I do? I just wing it. most of the time I just wing it. I pull it with my hand and stitch, and I just keep pulling with my hand as I go. So we're just going to start stitching this down. I am trying to stitch right next to the edge of the fold as I pull this over. And what I'm trying to pay attention to as I'm pulling this around is that my folded edge is nice and straight. It's nice and parallel with the edge of the quilt. I want to keep my binding nice and straight, and I want to keep it taut up against the edge of the quilt. I want it to feel nice and full. When I get about an inch or two away, maybe that's about 3 inches away from the edge down here, looking at the machine camera, I'm going to just kind of finagle this and fold it. Sometimes I find that folding the bottom up over the edge that's, I haven't sewn yet, this edge, I can't explain it, and then kind of tucking it in there and bringing the top over so I get that really nice mitered corner, and just playing with it until that fold is a perfect 45 degree. Then I'm just going to clip that so I don't have to hold it with my hand. And I'm going to keep stitching down. Once I get onto that 45 degree fold, I could pivot the machine and stitch that corner down. I think I heard that some people or some shows require that. I'm just not doing that. I'll do it by hand if I have to. Then, with my needle in the down position, I'm going to lift my foot, rotate my quilt 90 degrees, and I'm going to start coming down this edge. Oops. There we go. Did I put my label on? No, my label will be put on by hand once everything is done. Why are we not pulling through? Come on. There we go. It didn't want to stitch. It didn't want to feed the fabric through. And it's doing this weird thing. I feel like the presser foot tension, it might be a little off. I'll have to look at the machine tomorrow. But it's doing this weird thing where the fabric's sliding underneath the presser foot when I am adjusting. I don't think I have any drag on the quilt. It's also a little hard to see for me because the thread is blending in with the fabric so stinking perfectly that I feel like I can't quite tell if I'm on the fabric. How did you make the label? I'll go over that as soon as I get this binding on. So I will tell you, I design my labels on my computer, and then I print them off using EQ8 or EQ paper. Maybe it's EQ8 paper. It's like a fabric that you can put through your inkjet. And there are instructions that you need to follow to set the ink on it. I've already prepared my label. So I designed it and I printed it out this evening. and then I folded under where I'm going to hem it, and then once my quilt is all done, I'll hand stitch that label onto the back of the quilt. Am I going to wash this before I enter it in the quilt show? No. I don't really like to wash my quilt show quilts. I like the way they feel when they're nice and crisp. Beth did give me a special little label to put on my quilt. Every time she gives me a quilt back from the long arm, she gives me a fun label. I've got this one that says my best work yet, and I am going to sneak that into the bottom right corner of this quilt. It's going to be on the front too. And it looks like a ribbon too, so even if this doesn't win a viewer's choice ribbon or any ribbon at any show that it's ever displayed at, it has a ribbon. Beth gave me a ribbon for it. Oh my gosh. Therian says, hello, good evening to all. Becca, my granddaughter and I watch your channel all the time. I have learned so much from you. Thank you. I'm glad you are here with us. All right, I've got my mitered corner lined up right where I want it to be, so my clip's going to hold that in place for me. And I'm just going to sneak in this little label that says my best work yet, and I don't care. I don't care if I'm not supposed to have it there. I'm putting it there. Come on. I think for machine binding, I'm going to tell you I probably prefer the Juki. Sorry, Ruby, but you are making me mad. She's struggling to pull the fabric through. And it's just a little extra work on my hands than if I had something that was a little bit heavier duty. A Beth ribbon is the best kind to receive, right? Yes. Yes. A Beth ribbon is the best kind of ribbon to receive. Perfect. Oof. My feed dogs just don't feel like they're engaging with the quilt as much as they normally would. Zaza says, Becca, you are making that poor old lady work hard. Elder abuse. cut some loose threads when I'm done. Am I almost done? Oh, I know. You're thinking the same thing, aren't you, Ruby? Bill says I have a 401. They are nice. They are not straight stitch. They do 1,000 stitches. I wonder if I just need to really clean out under the feed dogs because it's been a minute since I've done that. She's doing well now. It might have just been, I might have had like some drag or something that I didn't realize I had. Just even a little bit of drag will make it so that the machine can't pull the quilt in. It doesn't take much. Aw, thank you for joining the channel sponsorship, the channel members. The Lady Lair says, I call machine binding a wrestling match. I could see why. I agree with you on that. Eek. How many sides was that? 1.5? Oh. So in the software program that I have, when I design my quilt labels for my quilts, I always give the quilt a name, and then I'm able to write whatever I want on there, and because it's printing out on the computer, it's always going to look neat. But if there's any special graphics or images that I want to put on the label, I get to do that as well. And I get to do it quilt by quilt because I'm printing out individual I'm printing out labels for each individual quilt instead of having them bulk made for all of my quilts. So like this one, because this was my pattern, the quilt label gets to say designed and pieced by me, and then it says it was quilted by Beth. I have a spot right here where I put this clip. You can't really see. There it is, where I veered off of the binding for like 1/2 inch, if that. And so that's my visual indicator to go back and restitch that down. I think the drag that I'm getting is not with the quilt hanging off of the table. I think it's the quilt actually tucked up under itself. There we go. Struggle bus tonight, man, I tell you what. There we go. There we go. Donna Heflin won the 3rd mystery prize, or is that the 4th one? I'm not sure. Here's a spot where I want to fix the binding. Third, it's the third one, okay. So there'll be one more in a bit. Oof. Mary said the last fractured fingers giveaway will start at 9:30 p.m. Fractured fingers giveaway. Mary, you're a nut. I love you. What's crazy is she has been but she has been living her life for a couple of weeks with her hand that was really sore. Everybody's been telling her to go to the doctor. She didn't go. And then she finally went. They're like, oh yeah, you broke a finger. Go see a orthopedic specialist to make sure you don't have to have surgery or anything. And she goes to the orthopedic specialist. And they're like, oh, you didn't break one finger. You broke four. Poor girl. She can't catch a break. And it was on her same bad hand, the one that she fell and broke her wrist or her arm from a couple years ago. So yeah, that was a fun time for her. I think this might be, dare I say, I dare say, the last. We're in the home stretch, guys. We're in the home stretch. Come on, get back on there. There's a couple of spots where it's a little sloppy, so I'll go back in with my seam ripper and tidy up that edge stitching. That's why I'm stopping to put clips on it if anybody's curious. I just want to get it tacked down. And if I took the time to glue base this down all the way around, then, or iron it out and then flip it over and clip it down all the way around, that would have been less of a struggle for me. And those might be things that I wouldn't have to do later. But I want this quilt donezo, so I wasn't going to take an hour and a half to glue binding. Wasn't going to happen. Donna responded. Awesome. Oh, almost there. A couple more inches. Oof. Come on, Ruby. Come on, Ruby. All right. Back tack that down. I do have some threads that I'll need to go through and snip, and a couple of spots where the stitching wasn't quite where I wanted it to be on the edge that I'll probably pick out and redo down. But for all intents and purposes, this quilt is bound. Let me show you what it looks like. Yep. Here we go. In fact, we're going to just hang this up back here. Gotta find another binder clip. I'm hanging it from the sleeve that I have attached. That is the quilt. So pretty. I need a drink of water. My goodness. Shelly says, you finally got around the 6th corner. Yes, I did. You know, the best part of all of this is once a quilt is fully finished, being able to just sit back and look at it. Now there's 4. I have 4 spots where clips are at that I could go in and just tidy up the stitching on the binding. But because I used a thread that was perfectly blended to the binding fabric, which is honestly probably part of the reason that I had so much struggle staying on the edge of the fabric because I didn't have a guide. You can't tell from this distance that there's anything wrong with that. And it is the perfect color to frame out that quilt. It looks marvelous. I am super pleased with how this has turned out, which for me is such a funny thing because this is not fabric I would normally work with. But our tastes evolve as we're sewing, as we're getting more into our craft. Our tastes evolve and change over time. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if I would make a quilt with some Tula Pink fabric, I'd tell you no. There were fabric lines that she would have that I would feel like I liked looking at, but I didn't want to sew with. And a lot of the struggle that I had with her fabric is I didn't know how to cut it. And I had that same problem with not just Tula, but anybody that makes a big print because I get paralyzed at the idea of cutting off an element in the yardage that I won't be able to use again. So fussy cutting is outside of my wheelhouse. It is outside of my comfort zone. And so I started thinking about, well, you know, I bought a 1-yard bundle of the Everglow prints with all the animals on it. And I thought I want to do something with it. And so that's where this quilt came from. I wanted to give myself the ability, the freedom to create a quilt featuring the animals from the Neon Everglow line because I really liked the colors and I really liked the animals. So I pulled out the 1-yard cuts that I had on my shelf. I didn't need the full yard. And I told myself it was okay if I cut into the fabric and I couldn't use every last bit of that fabric as long as I could fussy cut out animals that would be showcased in the center of those blocks. And in the end, that fabric is going to look better in a finished quilt than just folded up on my shelf. So this was the result of that. When I made the quilt pattern, I made it because I wanted you to be able to showcase some of those fabrics that have a bigger print. Zaza says, I do EPP and it does a lot of fussy cutting. I really struggle with the waist. I absolutely do. I fall asleep with the waist, or I fall asleep with the waist. I'm reading Bill's comment that says, I fall asleep to Tiffany's Juki every Sunday. I struggle with the waist too, but in the world of fussy cutting and in the world of FPP, there's going to be waste and there's nothing that I can really do about it. I can try to minimize it as much as possible, but I also don't want to stifle, I don't want to make it so painful that I don't want to create. And let me give you an example. If my goal is to create and just make something and enjoy the process, if the idea of having too much waste paralyzes me from creating, and I'm trying to constantly find ways to minimize my amount of wasted or scrap fabric in the end, then for me, and for others it might not be the case, but for me it's going to hurt my brain and I'm not even going to want to challenge the project. And so that quilt is never going to get sewn. That fabric is never going to get cut because I'm going to be paralyzed with the idea of waste, and I won't want to waste any of the fabric. Once I embrace that there's going to be waste, and I talked about this in the video tutorial that I did for this quilt. Once I embrace that there's going to be waste, then it opens up that freedom to make something. And the reality is once I've done cutting all the fabric up and putting it together, I have my fabric on display in a quilt, which is great. But if there's any offcuts, I can always put those into a scrap bin and do some other piecing or do something with a scrap project later. Mary says, it sounds like you're winding down. So the last giveaway will only be a 5-minute turnaround. Somebody else is asking, are the gray corners snowballed? Yes. And all the instructions are in the pattern. So the corners of the block are snowballed. And then I've got flying geese-like units around the outside of the block. Vivian is saying, did she sew the binding from the back to the front? Yes, I did. I attached to the back and I flipped it over to the front and I stitched it down by machine on the front. Linda says, now I want to make this quilt. Well, let me tell you what, Linda. The pattern is available for you for $10 on my Etsy shop. If you are a member of my VIP program, which is $5 a month, this is a free download for you in the VIP section of my website. When you go to sewbecca.com, up at the top of the page, there is a menu option for VIP. And when you click on that, you'll have VIP download library, and you'll also have VIP something else. I can't remember what it is. Zoom information, like the events, I think. Anyway, you have to be a member of my VIP program on my website to have access to those areas of my website. But this pattern is in the download library for free. Otherwise, it's $10 on my Etsy shop. And Donna from Handmade by Ying just started last week a sew along with this. So if you are interested in doing this now, later, whenever you want to get caught up, you want to just put it on your bucket list, she's got this pattern broken down into four videos, I think they are, and they're all live streams. So you're going to see her walk through it. She's going to show you how she's doing it, and then you can sew along with her. I'd love to see what you make. I'm watching the chat go fun. Kathy Klein says, I bought the pattern for my Tula fabric. Awesome. I'm glad to see that. I can't wait to see what your quilts look like. Let's head over to the Facebook group and we'll see what you guys have been working on tonight. Because you're right, Mary, I am winding down. My quilt is bound. I am winding down. Buffy says, I was paralyzed as a creator for so many years because I couldn't be perfect. Thanks to creators like you, I have found the joy in the making and can look past the imperfections. Thank you. You're welcome, Buffy. I don't quilt to be a blue ribbon quilter. Would I like a blue ribbon? Sure. Would I like a viewer's choice woman? Absolutely. I mean, everybody loves awards. But what I really quilt for, the reason why I really do this is because I enjoy the creative process. I enjoy making something. I enjoy playing with the fabric. I enjoy putting things together. And I make the videos because I enjoy sharing that process with each of you. I know I'm going to have imperfections. I know I'm not the best quilter out there. But if at the end of the journey, I have enjoyed the process of making the quilt and I like the way it looks, or somebody else loves it, then mission accomplished. Period. You'll get better with every one that you do. You're always going to you're going to keep learning, right? So even on this one, like I stumbled, well, I know things that I could do in the next one when I'm binding the next quilt that would make that process go a little bit better and wouldn't give me as much of a hard time. All right, let's take a look and see what's going on in the Facebook group. I'm going to refresh the screen. Linda says, it's so great to see the pattern fully made. Great way to show off those prints. Thank you. All right. We've got one new member request, so we're going to approve them and get them in. That's what Jack the Ripper is for. That's right, Free Spirit. Linda says, my reason for quilting too, it's the making and the love from family and friends that pleases me most. Absolutely. There's nothing better than seeing something that you made and then seeing somebody else love it. Okay, I don't know why it's not taking the approve. Oh, we just got lots of people coming in, that's all. How is Zoe's quilt going along? Mary Lou is asking. So I worked on that a little bit last week on the live stream, and I played with the idea of putting additional blocks into the quilt, and you saw it hanging up behind this quilt all night. It's been hanging on the shelf behind me. I toyed with the idea of making some 9 patches and separating it out so that there were elephants and 9 patches and elephants and 9 patches. But as I started looking at it over the weekend, last weekend, I realized I don't like the 9 patches in that quilt because the quilt is so busy already with all of the fabrics. There's only 3 fabrics in this quilt: the dots, the stripes, and the elephant fabric. But there's so much going on visually that adding in those other elements, those other design elements, just isn't what I want. When I saw it up on the design board, I realized that's not the way I'm going to go. And so before I hung this quilt up, if you just rewind back at any point during tonight's live stream, you'll be able to see it. The block that was hanging up there, it's made of 9 elephant blocks, and that's what I'm going to make. I'm going to make a bunch of those 9 patches and put those together. I have a stack of elephant blocks that I did make last weekend. I have enough to probably make 2 or 3 more of those blocks, so it's slow and steady, but it is coming along. All right, back to the sew and tell. Good night, CC Real. See you later. Mary Lou Lion won the giveaway. Awesome, awesome. All right, so let's see what has been going on in the chat or in the Facebook group. Jamie says, it's so nice to have a live to join while I'm recovering from knee surgery. Hopefully I can stay awake for a while. Patty Sear says she's working on this for her boyfriend's grandson. I spy some Tula fabric in there. Cheryl Swift Pickett says, I'm working on a bib for an adult friend who has been very sick. Please don't pick too badly on it. Why would we pick? Did you enjoy making that? Mission accomplished. Will the person love it? Mission accomplished. Nothing else needs to be said. Diane Sherman Adden says, Christmas Adventure by Riley Blake using a free fat quarter shot pattern. Melissa says she's working on the Jaybird Quilts Rock Candy table topper. This is the flimsy for a co-worker's mom. She decided to do her kitchen in lemons. The backing will be lemon fabric. Welcome, Mary Lou Lion. She says, I'm here. I don't believe I won. Thank you, everyone. Mary, I'm here. Katie from Greenland says, I'm testing a pattern called Modern Tumbling Blocks. I like that. This is from Andrea of Mama J Enterprises. I know Andrea's in the chat, so if she wants to do exclamation selfie, you'll get a link to her channel. I'm having a blast making it. The photo shows the first 4 sections, which consist of 12 rows. Awesome. That's really nice. I like that. Yvette Hartsoe says she has just finished finally piecing all the blocks for the LBQ Laundry Basket Quilts sew along. It's called Valley Ranch. If you are one of the lucky 4 winners from tonight, make sure to email Mary at sewbecca.com with your physical mailing address. She'll let you know she got your email, and then she'll send you back a tracking number so you can keep an eye on your package as it makes its way from her house to yours. Dara Roberta English says, I got the quilt done, but I thought it was too small, so I'm still making more. Holly Savage says, hi, everybody. Happy Friday. My dinner guest just left, so I'll have to watch the replay. There you go. Andrea just put her link in the chat so you guys can check out her channel. I'm going to guess that she may have a video when that pattern is all done. Anthea has some bags that she's recently finished posted. Ooh, nice wallets. Nice. Lori Corbett says she's making a scrappy Oh Happy Day fabric for quilt for her Eleanor. Pretty flowers. Jennifer Turney worked on her All the Things tote by Knot and Thread Designs. It was a fun and easy pattern and a great bag for hauling supplies to retreats. That's actually exactly what I thought when I saw this. I was like, ooh, that would be a good retreat bag. Ooh, I might need to make one of those. Nice. Deborah Heacock, says, I had 3 years worth of leftover pre-cuts and manually cut jelly roll strips. I finally sewed the cut leftovers into what created 2.5 homemade jelly rolls, and then I sewed the 2 jelly roll race quilt tops. Now I can breathe and stop worrying about doing something with them. And of course, I now find myself wondering if I should make the scraps into strips, or new scraps into strips. Deb Rhodes says she is working on this for her daughter. Oh, it's a puff quilt. Aw, I love it. Good night, Josie. Josie Brown says, good night, Becca, Mary, and everyone in the chat. Good night. Annette Dabrowski says this is her Queen of Diamonds quilt top. It is ready to be quilted, and she is going to do it on her Singer with these variegated threads. Karen says, yesterday I finished the center. Tonight I got the border on. The pattern is called Chroma, so a flimsy is done. I just need to sandwich and quilt it now, but that won't happen before I go on vacation for a couple of weeks. Enjoy your vacation. That'll be there for you when you get back. Lisa says, she writes, I mean, it was super easy to put together. But it's done! I've had this kit in my closet for 5 years. I'm going to quilt it with glow-in-the-dark thread that I've seen in my local quilt shop. I just hope my long arm likes the thread. Lynn says she'll post next week, and maybe she can get suggestions if she should take her star log cabin apart or not. The curries are folded up in a bin at the moment. Elizabeth says she's working on these tea towels. She's using AccuQuilt dies to make those. Terry's sharing a picture of her puppy. She says she's been hand sewing these Hexies freestyle, nearly 700 so far. I left Sebastian Bach, who is 13 today, in the photo for cuteness. He is my best buddy. Shelley Clark says, my hotel set up this week for free time. We attended a Model A meetup with over 60 Ford Model A's. It was in Redmond, Oregon. I did get up to the quilt shop in Sisters, Oregon, and bought the Violet Craft pattern for the Three Sisters Mountain. Oh, I like that. And here's a picture of a Model A for those of you that don't know what that is. Well, a couple of them, actually. All right, we'll refresh and see if anyone else has joined the group and posted anything. Yep, we got one from Jeannie Kennedy. She finished these stained glass curtains. I like that. That's nice. Bill says he's making this for a friend to take to chemo next week. Nicely done, Bill. How many threads are you wearing on your shirt right now? Denise says, I won first place ribbon at an adult best in show at one of our local fall fairs for my Quilt As You Go pillow made with jelly roll strips. Congratulations on the win. Look at that beautiful ribbon. Look at that beautiful fabric. Very pretty. Donna Forrest. Hey, Texas. She says, I entered 4 quilts in one of my Quilt Guild's quilt shows and placed on each one first place, 2 second places, and 1 honorable mention. It was a busy, busy month for me in August. So let's take a look at these. This one won first place. This is the first place ribbon winner. Oh, so pretty. This one won second place. That's a second place quilt. This is a second place quilt. Oh my goodness, look at all those flying geese. Or maybe that's honorable mention. No, I think this is honorable mention. Yep. Awesome. Congratulations, Donna. Tamala says, I finished this and gave it to my granddaughter, so now I am just cutting scraps. The background has metallic fairies. Ooh, let's take a look at that background. You can't tell us it has metallic fairies and expect us to not zoom in a little bit. I like that. That's nice. I like that. Mary says she still needs an email with a mailing address from Kathleen Carnes. Kathleen, please make sure to email Mary at mary@sobecca.com. Susan says, my 2 quilts hanging at the Washington State Fair this week. Beautiful. Oh, I spy some ribbons on that quilt. Lady Lair says, I'm heading to Florida next week. Do you put your sewing machine in your carry-on or check it? I would never check a sewing machine. But that's just me. And then we're back to the beginning. So there we go. There we go, guys. So I agree. Mary Ford says, so much amazing talent. I absolutely agree. That's one of my favorite things about the Friday nights when we are able to spend some time looking at the Facebook group to see what you guys have all been working on, because I'm not the only one who makes beautiful quilts. You all make some very beautiful quilts, and some of you have more talent in your little finger than I have in my whole body. I'm looking at you, Texas. You know who you are. All right, friends, that's about it for me. I've got a very busy weekend of sewing ahead of me. I've got at least one more quilt that has to be bound, and I've got to get that sleeve and label attached. But before we end the live stream, I did promise you that I would talk about my label because somebody asked about that. And I said I would show it to you, and I almost forgot. So the way I make my labels, and I'll show you one that I have already prepared, because I don't know where, oh, there's the other one. This is the one for Trellis Garden. So the way I make my labels is I design them in Canva, and then I print them off on this product. It is called EQ Printables. It is cotton fabric, and I'll just show you in the overhead what to expect with this product. So when you purchase a pack of this, you're going to get a sheet of instructions for your inkjet printer, and then you're going to have a piece of fabric. This is cotton fabric, and on the back side of it is this, it's not adhesive, but it's like it's stuck onto the fabric. My words are escaping me right now. The reason why I'm telling you that one side is shiny and one side is fabric is because the fabric is the side that you're going to print on. So I always look at my machine and figure out the way that this needs to be fed in. For my printer, I have to feed it in with the fabric side down. I think that might be the case for most printers because it's going to go into the printer and come around like this with the printed side up. But you do what's right for your printer. Once that's done, and it's printed, I let it sit for a good 10 or 15 minutes, sometimes even longer, so that all of the ink can seep into the fabric and dry. I don't touch it. I just leave it on the printer. And then I can peel this shiny stuff off, and I have to soak it to really set the ink, the color on the fabric. Once that's done, I usually take the label and I let it air dry flat. If I'm in a bit of a rush, I will clip it to the front of an oscillating fan and let it dry that way. And then once that's done, I give it a good press. And then I flip over each of those raw edges 1/4 of an inch and press that down so that I have a nice folded edge all the way. And that becomes my label. So now what I'll do is I'll take this and put it on the back of my quilt, and I'm just going to do a stitch all the way around all 4 sides. Now there's a couple of ways that you can do this. If Mary is attaching a label for me, which she has been known to do in the past, she stitches it so you can't see the stitching. And so I give it a nice like I'll sew that hem down so I can see stitching around it to make it look pretty. But for me, I think I'm going to do some big stitch quilting to tie this in. The big stitch quilting is only going to go through the back. It's not going to go through the front of the quilt. And I'm going to do a running stitch around all 4 sides. They're not going to judge my quilt on how nicely attached the label is. I'm going to do it my way because I'm not very good with a whip stitch right now. And I know it's going to be sloppy and not evenly spaced. And I know I can do big stitch quilting much neater than if I were to do a whip stitch. And if I ever want to hide the stitches, I can always rip this off and put it back on again. So that's what I'm going to do with this. And oh, by the way, that's actually what I'm going to do with my, the bottom of my quilt sleeve is I'm just going to run some stitches down across the back to hold it in. So there you go. That's it. Oh, Mary is saying that this is cotton muslin on top of freezer paper, which is allowing you to get it through your machine. Did you talk about your apron or did I miss that? I did not talk about my apron, but I will talk about my apron because you asked. So I did tell you this. I got a apron from Missouri Star. It was a Jenny signature apron in a box that Missouri Star sent to me to celebrate their Sweet 16 birthday bash this month. I know, 16 years, right? And I've been wearing that, and I love the idea of all the threads kind of sticking to the apron, but I also love the idea of having pockets on there and just kind of keeping my clothes in a little bit better shape. I don't know about you, but I feel like the shirts that I wear, especially like the t-shirts that I wear in my sewing room, they get lots of little fuzzies and lint and strings on them, and they can start to pill up a little bit easier. And so I feel like the aprons might help save some of my tops. Oh, maybe, we'll see. So I got really excited about wearing that apron, but I didn't love the idea of always having to tie it in the back. And even though I don't really feel it on the back of my neck, it is one of those that goes up and around the back of my neck. I love that apron and I do use it, but I wanted one that doesn't go around the back of my neck and that I didn't have to tie. So I went on Amazon and I found this one. Now, this apron was a smock style apron, meaning that it had the front and it had the back. It is straps right here, so it kind of looks like a jumper dress. I'll stand up so you can see what it looks like. But it had ties that went right here. And I was having a heck of a time getting those to tie, right? Like, because getting your arms over there is weird. And I didn't want to pull the ties to the front and the ties to the back. What I really wanted is something that I could just slip on like a tunic. So Donna actually had this great idea and I did it. She suggested getting a piece of fabric from my shelves that coordinated with the apron and just sewing it on as kind of a gusset to adhere to the back and the front so that it turns into just like a little tunic. And so that's exactly what I did. I pulled a solid off of my shelf that coordinated with all the pretty roses and flowers that are on here. And I just sewed those sides together. And my pockets are right here so I can put everything in here. Now that I know what size this is, I feel like I can take it off and use this to make a template so that I could sew my own out of my own quilting cotton fabric and still have this overall shape. I've got a pocket up here that can hold scissors and pens, and I've got two here. I do think that once I do that, because I will be doing that, I'm going to take the pockets and move them over to the side a little bit, because I would rather have the pockets here than here. But you know, this fabric wasn't there when I bought it. So I bought the pattern, I bought the apron off Amazon, and it was a plus size apron. So I'll put it in the Facebook group if anybody's curious, and I'll also put it in the description box down below, so you can get it on the replay. But the fabric is off of my stash. So yeah. Can you use it with a computer Word program and not through other programs? Joan is asking. Yes, you can. You could definitely do this with Google Docs or Microsoft Word or Excel if you wanted to. Just play with the fonts, make sure you like what it says and you like the way the font looks, and the font is a nice big size that you can read. And then you're just going to print it off on this just like you would on regular paper. And then once this prints off, you'll follow the instructions that came in the package to allow the ink to dry and then to set it with some water, and then you'll do all of the same things that I do. You don't need to have special software for this. You can, whatever program that you use to type up what you want, if you can type something on a computer or an iPad or an iPhone and you have a printer at your disposal, you can use this to make your own custom labels for your quilts. No muss, no special tools required, just your computer or some device and a printer. Linda says, so pretty. I make crossbacks that I love, love, love. I almost live in them. I'm always cooking or sewing or cleaning, and they're so perfect. I did try to make a crossback apron. It is now in the trash. Yeah. It doesn't look good on me. I don't wear garments well where the straps come up and are halter-esque like. It makes this portion of my body look very sloppy, if you know what I mean. So I won't be wearing the crossback ones. That's why I wanted a jumper style one that I could just dive into, put on, and wear around the house. Mary is pointing out that your printer must be an inkjet and not a laser printer. That's absolutely right. Holly says, Shelley Clark, I was thinking the same thing. Find an old shirt and repurpose it. Shelley Clark says, may I suggest a knit for the sides? I know I spread out when I sit. Yep, you could definitely do that. I did build in some extra, so I know what you're talking about. I did build in a little bit of extra room so that I had the ability for this to spread out, because I do spread out when I sit too. So this is a little bit bigger than it needs to be to accommodate the sitting position. I added a couple of inches for that. The other thing that makes this easier is I'm not wearing it like a dress. I'm wearing it like a shirt. So when I'm sitting down, I'm wearing it like a long shirt, really. When I'm sitting down, I'm not sitting on it. I'm not tucking it under me because this isn't a dress. It's not intended to be a dress. It's intended to be a shirt or a cover, right? So yeah, that's one thing that you could do. You could also, if I were to make this out of my own fabric, you could also cut it on bias so that it's a little stretchy as well. Yep. Do you have to heat set the ink? Eric is asking. No, you set the ink by soaking it. It says you soak the printed fabric in room temperature water for 10 minutes to remove the excess printer ink. And then you carefully rinse until the water runs clear, and the process sets the ink without losing any color or quality. I have noticed, I will tell you what I have noticed with this is if you put the paper, the printable, in water too soon after it comes off the printer, the ink will run into the grain of the fabric. So you really want to make sure that this is nice and dry before you soak it. Yep, D. Adams is asking, could I drop an Amazon link to the fabric paper you bought? Absolutely. And I'll also put it in the description box too. It is called EQ Printables, and I'll give you an affiliate link, which helps me a little bit, and it'll help you too. This is it. Looks like it is about $18 on Amazon for, at the time of the live stream, for a package. And I think a package has 25 sheets of paper in it, maybe 10. Oh, well, this one says it's 6. I don't know how many this package has, but I'm giving you the link. Here is the EQ Printables on Amazon. There you go. And I'll make a note so I can put that in the description box too. And then also, while I'm at it, because somebody's going to ask, I'm just going to go into my orders on Amazon, and I'll get the link to this apron that I bought because it's a apron for a plus size girl. It's called a cobbler apron. It was $16.99, and they have a ton of different designs. So I will put this in the live chat as well. So no luck on the crossback, I'm assuming. Nope, no luck. 6 sheets, yeah. It is kind of expensive. So I will tell you with this, you're paying quite a bit of money for the product, but there's something about being able to run it through your own machine, your own printer, and having your own custom labels and having them look good. I try to play with my 8.5 by 11 layout, my piece of paper layout in Canva or Word or whatever it is you're going to use to get as many labels on there as possible. And so I actually will not make a label until I have multiple quilts ready for a label. So today I printed off 3 labels on a single sheet of paper, or single sheet. I won't waste a sheet of paper just to make one label. I make labels in multiples. So Terry says, I have sealed my fabric labels using heat and bond vinyl that you iron on and over. It's just a different way of sealing it. There you go. Jan says, has it been a while since you oiled the whole machine? It's making a clacking noise. I just oiled it. I just oiled it. Now I'm curious. No clacking noise here. No, it might have been something you were hearing on the table jiggling, but no, it sounds great. And I did just oil it a few days ago. In fact, I have a funny story about that because you're going to laugh. So I've been really good about oiling all the holes and then lifting it up and taking the bottom off and oiling down there and putting oil in the bobbin, all of that, all of that. I've been following all of the holes. And then I was sitting here last weekend on Sunday. That's when I oiled the whole machine because it was time to oil it. Anyway, I was sitting here on Sunday. I was like, well, it's been a while since I've oiled the machine. Let me put oil in everywhere. So I did. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to sew. And I started sewing and I was hearing a squeaking noise. I was like, what is going on? Why is it squeaking? And so I'm looking around. I can't find anything that's going to cause the squeaking. And then I realized, oh, I haven't oiled in here in forever. So I oiled in here really good. And then I started sewing again and it was still squeaking. So I had to unthread my needle, take my bobbin out, and I just ran the machine at a high speed to get that lubricant in there going. And you know, while I got it open, it looks a little dry. We'll put a couple drops of oil in here too. That's the one thing that I do like about these older machines. I don't feel like you can over oil them. I know they say you can with the Juki, but I don't think you can with an older machine. So there you go. Anywho, that's it. I know I said I was going to get off here a while ago. I'm going to get off here a while ago. The pedal. Why are you saying the pedal? Also, I don't know why you're saying the pedal. I missed the live when you shared your 301. Can you tell me about it, please? Jamie says. So this is a night. All the questions keep coming in. So maybe this is the last one we're going to answer. This is a 1951 Singer 301. I found it on Facebook Marketplace for 50 bucks. 50 bucks, 50 bucks. It was not red when I got it. It was in great working order. I sent it down to my friend's father who restores and paints vintage machines, and he custom painted it red for me, which is why we call her Ruby. She is a 1951 Singer 301. I absolutely love her. She was intended to be a travel machine because I have a Juki that I love to sew on, and the Juki weighs almost 40 pounds while this weighs about 15 or 16. So my intention was to get this to travel with. However, I love sewing on it so much that it has quickly just dominated my entire quilting life. And the Juki unfortunately sits over there waiting for a job that Ruby doesn't want to work on. I'm sorry. I'll spend some time with you soon, but it won't be tonight because I'm going to bed. So I'll see you all later. Make sure to hug someone, tell them you love them, and I'll see you guys next Friday. Bye, friends.